This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Not everyone is careful with your personal information, which might explain why there's a victim of identity theft every 5 seconds in the US. Fortunately, there's LifeLock. LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats to your identity. If your identity is stolen, a US-based restoration specialist will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year by visiting lifelock.com/podcast. Terms apply.
Fellas, you know Degree Cool Rush deodorant, right? Well, last year they changed the formula, and guys were mad about it. One dude even started a petition. So guess what? Degree heard us, admitted they messed up, and brought the original Cool Rush scent back exactly how it was. And it's in Walmart, Target, and other stores now for under $4. So grab some and remember why its cool, crisp, and fresh scent made it the #1 men's antiperspirant for the last decade. Degree Cool Rush is back, and it smells like victory for all of us.
Welcome to the 4 parks of Universal Orlando Resort, featuring the new Universal Epic Universe. With spectacular hotels, we offer a week of vacation excitement. Visit universalorlando.com.
EVO. This series contains adult language and depictions of graphic violence. Listener discretion is advised. It began long before human beings wrote things down. The land that would become County Antrim emerged from mist and myth, its basalt cliffs rising like ancient guardians along the northern edge of Ireland. The Giant's Causeway, that cathedral of volcanic stones, stood silent and impenetrable, older than any church, older than humanity itself, and yet it would be man who gave the land its meaning. Stone circles turned into churches, hearths became altars, and blood spilled not only in conquest, but in worship. The first people who came to Antrim were wanderers of the Mesolithic age, etching a living from the forests and coasts. They brought their tools and fire, and, in time, their dead. Then came the Celts, bringers of iron, language, and gods who lived in trees and streams. The Druids ruled the sacred groves, speaking with nature and guiding kings, and for centuries, their power went unchallenged. But in the 5th century, across the Irish Sea, a boy named Patricius, kidnapped from Britain, enslaved in Antrim's shadowed hills, returned not with vengeance, but with scripture. As St. Patrick, he brought a message of love wrapped in divine fire. Christianity came not as a sword, but as a slow, patient wave, overtaking the high places and the sacred wells. In County Antrim, it nestled in the glens and took root. Monks became the new keepers of truth, scratching Latin prayers into calfskin in cold stone rooms. They built sanctuaries at places like Armoy and Rathlin Island, where whispers of old gods lingered, but new hymns drowned them out. Crosses rose where a dolmen's once stood, and holy wells, once pagan, were baptized by saints. By the 9th century, Antrim was a land bruised by Norse longships. Vikings raided the monastic houses, looted their libraries, burned their wooden chapels. Yet even the invaders, awed by the faith they tried to destroy, eventually bent the knee. The Christian God proved harder to kill than the pagan ones. Centuries passed, and Antrim became a mosaic of kingdoms, of Norman knights and Gaelic chieftains, of alliances forged and betrayed. But always the land endured, its cliffs, its glens, its stubborn people. In the 17th century came the English crown and the Protestant Scots, settlers of the Ulster plantation. Christianity split like a struck rock, Catholic and Protestant, Latin and English. In Antrim, the division ran deep and would erupt again and again through the troubles of the 20th century. Churches stood on both sides, sometimes as sanctuaries, sometimes as symbols of division. Yet in the quiet hours, away from politics and parades, the faith that came with Patrick still lives in Antrim, in the candlelit silence of a chapel in Ballymena, in the ruined abbey stones of Muckamore, in the whispered prayers of fishermen before the storm. Antrim remains, as it always has been, wild, wounded, watching. A place where history sleeps lightly and God, in all his Irish contradictions, still walks the glens. Welcome back to The Devil Within. You're listening to The Witches of County Antrim. In the wind-swept coastal village of Island Magee, County Antrim, the year 1711 marked a dark chapter in Irish history. This small community became the setting for Ireland's last witch trial, a poignant reflection of the era's fears and societal tensions. The trial was not merely a localized incident. It was the echo of centuries of superstition, gender politics, and religious paranoia reverberating through a corner of Ulster. The events began in February 1711, when Mary Dunbar, a young woman of about 18, arrived in Island Magee. Soon after, she began experiencing violent fits and claimed to be tormented by witches. Her accusations targeted 8 local women: Janet Mean, Janet Latimer, Janet Miller, Margaret Mitchell, Catherine McCalmond, Janet Liston, Elizabeth Seller, and yes, Janet Carson. These women, many of whom were widows or healers, were accused of bewitching Dunbar, leading to their arrest and trial in Carrickfergus. The trial was presided over by judges James McCartney and Anthony Upton. While Upton urged the jury to consider the lack of concrete evidence and the good character of the accused, McCartney advocated for conviction. Ultimately, the jury found the women guilty under the Witchcraft Act of 1586. They were sentenced to a year in prison and to stand 4 times in the pillory. This trial is notable not only for its verdict, but also for highlighting the clash between emerging Enlightenment ideals and lingering superstitions. Though the Island Magee trials are remembered as the last of their kind in Ireland, they occurred within a larger, centuries-old European tradition that had already seen tens of thousands of individuals accused, tortured, and executed under the suspicion of witchcraft. By the 18th century, belief in witches had begun to recede in parts of Western Europe, particularly among the educated elite. But in rural regions like Ulster, old fears and folk traditions still held sway. In 18th century Europe, a witch was perceived not merely as someone who dabbled in folk practices, but as a malevolent agent of the devil, someone who had signed a pact with Satan and thus posed a spiritual and physical threat to Christian society. Witches were blamed for livestock deaths, crop failures, illnesses, and even infertility. The connection between misfortune and sorcery was deeply ingrained in the communal imagination. The process of identifying witches often followed chillingly familiar and tragically flawed steps, rooted more in superstition and social prejudice than in any rational inquiry. The fear of witches was a communal one, and once suspicion took hold, the momentum often became irreversible. We'll cover the 5 most common means of identifying a potential witch. 1. Accusation by a neighbor or family member. This is often spurred by long-standing grudges, jealousy, or sudden misfortunes, like illness or death of livestock and individuals. Particularly women on the margins of society could be accused of witchcraft with little or no evidence. In tight-knit rural communities, these accusations could spread like wildfire, endorsed more by rumor than proof. Number 2, physical signs in the witch's mark. Believers in witchcraft held that a witch bore physical signs of her pact with Satan. A, quote, witch's teat, often a mole, birthmark, or skin tag, was believed to be a point from which a demon fed. These marks were sought out during invasive public examinations. Women were stripped, examined, and even pricked with needles to determine whether any part of their body was insensible to pain, which was taken as evidence of guilt. Number 3, behavior and lifestyle. Unusual behavior, eccentric dress, or even simply being an older, unmarried woman could contribute to suspicion. Healers, midwives, and those with knowledge of herbal remedies were at particular risk, as their skills were often misunderstood or feared. Number 4, quote, swimming a witch. The ordeal of water, although falling out of fashion by the 18th century, was still occasionally used. In this brutal test, the accused was bound and thrown into water. If she floated, the water was believed to reject her, proving her guilt. If she sank, she might be innocent, but also would often drown. Number 5, confession under torture or coercion. Perhaps the most damning form of evidence came from confessions extracted under extreme duress. Methods of torture varied from sleep deprivation to physical beatings. Terrified and desperate, many confessed to flying through the air, dancing with demons, or attending satanic rituals. These confessions were then used as confirmation of guilt, even when obviously fantastical and forced.
Impact confirmed. The Slayer has been activated.
Demonic threat level increasing.
Hold the line!
All the power of hell cowering before one man.
id Software presents Doom, The Dark Ages. Available now on Xbox Series X and S, PlayStation 5, and PC.
Rated M for mature.
I already love same-day delivery with Shipt, but it's so much better since I signed up for Target Circle 360. Why? Because I no longer pay price markups from the majority of stores through Shipt. Only a handful of alcohol retailers and items don't count. That means no markups on groceries, pet food, even home goods and makeup. So to recap, I have more time to catch up on life while someone shops for me, and I spend less. It's a win-win. Order now at shipt.com/360. Terms apply.
Parents of tweens, if you're familiar with far-off drop-offs...
Dad, stop, right here.
Or get DMs about what's for dinner, you may be experiencing tween milestones. For your son or daughter, these can start at age 9. HPV vaccination, a type of cancer prevention against certain HPV-related cancers, can start then too.
For most, HPV clears on its own. But for those who don't clear the virus, it can cause certain cancers later in life.
Embrace this phase. Help protect them in the next.
Ask their doctor today about HPV vaccination. Brought to you by Merck.
We off? 30 seconds of carefree bliss.
Oof, like winding your hair carefree.
Oh, like using Clorox Disinfecting All-Purpose Cleaner in the home carefree.
Yes.
Like dog slobbing on the coffee table and cleaning it with Clorox Carefree.
He's on a roll now.
Spit toothpaste on the faucet.
You got it. You got it.
Peanut butter on the light switch.
Oh, spritz.
Spritz. Clorox, man. Clean feels good.
Okay, we're back. Use as directed.
The relationship between the Christian church and witch trials is complex and evolved significantly over time. While both Catholic and Protestant institutions were deeply involved in the witch persecutions from the 15th to the 17th centuries, by the 18th century, official church positions had become much more cautious, though this restraint did not always extend to local clergy or communities. In the early centuries of witch hysteria, theologians argued that witches were heretics in league with the devil. The Catholic Church, particularly during the Inquisition, supported trials and executions, often relying on manuals such as the Malleus Maleficarum from 1487, which argued that witches, mainly women, were threats to Christian society. This book was used by both clerical and civil authorities and helped codify the persecution of suspected witches across Europe. However, by the 1700s, Enlightenment ideals began to influence even religious institutions. The Vatican began urging moderation and skepticism, recognizing that many accusations stemmed from local vendettas or mass hysteria. Some Protestant denominations followed suit, advocating for a more reasoned interpretation of Scripture. Still, the local influence of parish priests and ministers could be powerful. In rural areas like Island McGee, clergy were often seen as moral authorities and interpreters of divine will. If a respected churchman confirmed that a person's afflictions were caused by witchcraft, the community might treat that claim as incontrovertible. Moreover, Protestant clergy in Ireland, especially in heavily Presbyterian Ulster, might see witchcraft as evidence of continued Catholic superstition or as a threat to social order. Thus, while the institutional church was retreating from the fervor of the witch-hunting era, its residual influence on local communities could still validate and perpetuate accusations, especially in isolated regions. Burning at the stake was less common by the 1700s, especially in Britain and Ireland, where hanging or pillorying were more typical. Imprisonment and public shaming became preferred methods, as seen in the Island McGee case. These sentences, while less final, still carried social and psychological torment, branding the accused as outcasts. Public pillories exposed individuals to verbal and physical abuse from their neighbors, and imprisonment could devastate families already living in poverty. Long after major European cities embraced Enlightenment ideals, the rural Irish countryside held fast to a worldview steeped in supernaturalism. The fear of witches, fairies, and changelings was persistent. Folk healers operated with a delicate balance of trust and suspicion. In such a setting, Mary Dunbar's afflictions were not seen through a medical lens, but interpreted as demonic possession or bewitchment. The 8 women accused in Island McGee, more than half of which were named Janet, likely fit a familiar profile: widowed, poor, or socially isolated. Their very marginality made them vulnerable. Once the community rallied around the idea of witchcraft, evidence was irrelevant. The need for a scapegoat outweighed reason. Though the trial ended without executions, its effects lingered. The women, once released, would have found themselves stigmatized and perhaps permanently ostracized. The case was remembered, if at all, as a local embarrassment, a whisper in the annals of Irish judicial history. In the modern era, historians, folklorists, and playwrights have revisited Island McGee. The trial has inspired books, academic research, and dramatic reenactments, helping to reclaim the stories of the women involved. The events are sometimes cited in discussions about mass hysteria, gendered violence, and the thin line between justice and persecution. In 2011, on the 300th anniversary of the trial, calls were made for the women to be formally pardoned. Though symbolic, such a gesture acknowledges the profound injustice they suffered. It also serves as a reminder of the ease with which fear can cloud judgment and institutions can fail the innocent. The Island McGee witch trial may have been Ireland's last, but it was no anomaly. It was the final chapter in a long, harrowing story of how European society grappled with fear of the unknown. Even as the Enlightenment spread reason and science, small communities still clung to age-old beliefs. Navigating the uncertain terrain between folklore and fact, religion and superstition. Today, Island McGee is a quiet village on the Antrim coast, known more for its cliffs and sea views than for its ghosts. Yet beneath the surface, the story endures. A cautionary tale, a fragment of history, a wound never quite closed. And perhaps that's as it should be, for remembering is a form of justice. And justice, even 3 centuries delayed, is still justice in the end. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the episode, please share it with someone who you think might enjoy it as well. And remember, follow the show at The Devil Within Pod on Instagram, and check out our video content on Spotify and on Facebook. And until next time, stay safe out there. The Devil Within is an EVO production, recorded live at Bel Air Studios in Los Angeles, California. For The Devil Within, I'm your host, Brandon Morgan.